What spirit are you using to motivate yourself to not be that person anymore that you don't want to be? So separating ourselves from old perceptions and uniting ourselves, giving ourselves over to the Spirit of Jesus a little more today than we did yesterday. So with that said, we all have this cycle that we go through. Whether you realize it or not, it's a circle that we all go through over and over and over, where you hit a low, you realize, wow, that's some bad stuff about myself. There's a perception there that is dark, it's destructive, it's self-destructive, it's relationally destructive, and I don't want to be that kind of person anymore. And then we get some self-knowledge, some revelation of some of the things that we can do, and then you start going around that cycle, that circle that you're in, you start improving. Maybe you put some extra emphasis in your prayer time. You really focus on, my gosh, I'm really sorry that I said those things, that I acted that way, that I treated someone that way. You see the full magnitude of this attitude and the kind of person that you want to be, and maybe how grateful you are that God has forgiven you and that he's cleansing you. And then you get to, I'm going to say, the pinnacle of you got it going on. You're doing your prayer time, you're faithful, you're putting your whole heart into it. You feel connected to Jesus, you're hearing from him, and life starts getting really good. And then you start losing a little clarity. You start backing off a little bit on your attention to what you're working on inside of yourself, and you start to fall a little bit and fall a little bit until you find yourself at the bottom again. And hopefully that bottom wasn't as low as last time. Right? That's the goal. Hopefully it wasn't as low of a low. Maybe you learned something last cycle and you were able to take a couple steps forward, and maybe this time you just took one step back. So you're still 2 steps ahead. That's a good thing. You see it, you say, oh my gosh, I can't believe I found myself back in this place again. And you say, I remember what happened last time. I don't want to go there. I really don't like this thing that keeps coming up. And then you start working your way back up the cycle again. And maybe you really connect to Jesus in a deeper way. And you go around and around and around we go. Everybody does this, whether you realize it or not. We live in a unspiritual world. There's this thing called denial that has a pretty powerful grip that is just constantly putting a pressure on us to forget who we are, forget what we're working on, what we're trying to accomplish inside of ourselves. But the goal is that you learn a little bit every single time, and eventually you get to this place where you steady out a little bit, where your lowest low isn't as low as it used to be, and you start really, I'm going to say, mastering your sin a little bit, having even a healthy fear or respect for it. This is our salvation process. Anybody not able to relate to what I'm talking about? You're just that steady line, through your process? No, of course not. Or we wouldn't still be here. Doing what we're doing, talking about our process and what works to progress. So on that up climb, I want you to think about something. When you hit that low place, Like you see some truths about yourself that are really hard to look at. Like think of an occasion. Just the last occasion where something came up and it was like, wow, I can't believe I said that. I can't believe I thought that. I can't believe I judged that way or reacted that way or was just so selfish in this scenario. And in that place, you want to get back on track. And that's the goal. That's what we do. But the question that I want you to ask yourself, and this is going to make it just a massive difference of how fast you're growing and what it looks like as you go through your cycle, is what are you using to pick yourself back up? We talked about agendas, motivations, and attitudes, perceptions going through this prayer. So when you're in that place where you're seeing some things about yourself, what spirit are you using to motivate yourself to not be that kind of person anymore? I'm going to say that one more time. I want you to really think about it. When you're at that low place, what spirit are you using to motivate yourself to not be that person anymore that you don't want to be? So let's say, example one, you have a person who is so afraid to look at themselves, so afraid to face what's really going on inside of their heart, they use a spirit of denial. And from that low, all of a sudden, they say, well, it's not that bad. It's not that big of a deal. And they may get themselves to that high place where they're feeling good. But what's going to happen to that person? Reality is going to come in. Circumstances are going to come. And you're going to crash. And then you hit that low place again. But if you used, say, a spirit of denial to try and pick yourself back up with, did you progress in your cycle? This cycle that we're all going through, did you progress at that point? Why not?
Because it's not the right spirit behind it, so it's just like an illusion or something.
Right. I think that's absolutely right, because if our salvation process is to be given a little bit more over to Jesus' spirit and a little more detached from our own just self-centered sin nature, then all we did was just avoided that whole, and now we got to go through another cycle. Okay, example two, say you use a spirit of fear. Say you use performance. You're in that you're at that place where all of a sudden things start to get exposed inside of your heart, and say you're so afraid of how everybody might be looking at you. And then you build yourself up in your own estimation and your own esteem, trying to make yourself feel better about this place that you let yourself go. But again, what's going to happen to that person? They're going to build up, and they're going to crash, won't they? Eventually, circumstances are going to come and the truth will be exposed, hopefully. Because sometimes people will give themselves so far over to some of those influences like denial or like fear or like performance, where they'll just avoid every person, circumstance, situation that will ever actually face the truth with themselves, and they never make it around again. We're going under the assumption of somebody who really wants to change and really wants to go through this process, but even still, that person that escapes, that fugitive at heart that just runs away from any kind of truth or intimacy or like spiritual growth, Jesus is still running after them. He's still chasing them, and he's still going to bring them through their own process. He's just going to have to do it in probably a more challenging and difficult way. And there's a word that we have to describe this process a little bit that I thought was going to be really helpful for everyone. We call it soul power. Because what happens to the person who doesn't use soul power when they get to a humbling place? Does that person crash? They don't. So in that moment, when you're faced with the truth of how great your need is for Jesus, and you don't try and step out of that truth with fear, with lies, with pride, with denial, all of which are soulish energy that we're generating to try and get out of this hole. Try and deal with these truths that we're facing about ourselves. What if you don't use soul power? What if you get to the honest, just sincere place inside of your heart that says, Lord, these things are true about myself. I'm incapable of being something different. And that's why I needed you to come and die for me. That's why I'm so grateful for your forgiveness. And I'm so grateful for your forgiveness that I want to be a different person just because I love you. Not because I don't like how I feel or because of how I look or humiliated at the failure, but just honest to goodness love. That's not soul power anymore, is it? You're recognizing your need for Jesus to help you just work through whatever you're working through in your process. And you don't have to crash anymore. And I have this image in my mind, bring us back to geometry class a little bit, is remember how we always had to do all those graphs and you had your y-axis and your x-axis. I don't really remember which one goes up and which one goes horizontal. But let's say on your vertical axis you have soul power, and on your bottom one you have just your life experience, your union with Christ. If every single time, say, you use your soul power, goes up and goes up and goes up, kind of like a roller coaster, and then you crash. Goes up and up and up, and then you crash. Up and up and up, and crash. You realize how stable you'll become, like on a chart where you'd be like a straight line. Or maybe, more realistically, your ups and downs be a little bit smaller. Your highs won't be so high, your lows won't be, you'll be a rock. You'll be a straight line. You'll be something of stability because you're not using a power that is not fruitful, that's not from God, that's just going to cause you to crash. How many times do you get to a sober place and you just walk away from it as quick as possible and you use soul power to do it? What if in that moment you use something else? What if you got yourself to a place to just say, I don't like that about myself. Feels bad to me. It feels bad to the person that I offended. And Lord, would you help me deal with these things inside of my heart? Why? Just like the prayer you guys just spent a week going through. Not because of my own reasons, not because of what I look like, not because of performance, not because of self-hatred, not because of self-esteem issues, depression, heaviness, bondage, lies, denial, haughtiness, jealousy, but just simply because you love him. Not because of everybody else, not because of your circumstances, but just simply because you love him. Do you realize the level of stability, like emotional, spiritual stability that would enter into your life if you stopped using soul power to deal with truth? To deal with the things that are being exposed inside of your heart. Things that Jesus just really, really wants to set you free from. I mean, please think of a moment when you were there and you saw something about yourself. How did you deal with it? Like, where'd you go from there? We all have a cycle that we go through, and you're going to go through it over and over and over, and the goal is to get a little better, but sometimes we don't get better. We just keep going through the same thing over and over, and there's a word for that. Call it insanity, right? Just complete insanity. Let me keep doing the same thing, using the same attitude, with the same strategy, expecting a different result, and you keep not getting one. And it really is like up to us of like how emotionally and spiritually stable you want to be. And it really comes down to that one moment. What are you going to use to pick yourself back up? Like that upswing in the cycle. Like, what are you going to use? What spiritual perception are you going to empower yourself with? And that person who keeps going around and around and around having the same results is either going to flee the scene, surround themselves with people who tell them exactly what they want to hear so they never have to go back to that place and actually face truth about themselves, or they're gonna get wise and say, I have to do something different here. I'm tired of crashing. If I stop using the same mechanisms that I've been using to pick myself back up, I can just, it stings to see the truth about ourselves, but I can go through it once. I can learn the lesson the first time. And in that moment, just say, Lord, I want to be a different person just because I love you. Just honest to goodness, because I love you. And if we have any other reason, you're gonna go through your cycle again and go through some challenging and difficult circumstances, and you might not be any better for it. Has everything to do with soul power. And when we're going through this process, this spiritual journey that we're on, the goal is to use a little bit less soul power and connect ourselves a little bit more to Jesus's power. And in doing so, your life will just be filled with stability, contentment, peace, joy. You're not going to crash all the time. If you're crashing, it's soul power. Whatever your brand of it might be. However you use it. And I just thought that maybe if we looked at that a little bit, you'd realize some of the ways that you might be stunting your growth, keeping yourself from growing at all, or maybe some ways to help yourself grow faster, or maybe just as simple, I don't want to be an emotional roller coaster all the time. I really enjoy contentment and stability, so how about I just deal with it in this moment and say I can be really afraid about how everybody's looking at me right now, or I can just say, Jesus, I need your help to be someone differently. Would you rise up inside of me to cause me to be someone differently? Why? Well, Jesus, because I love you. Because I want to follow you. I want my will to be attached to yours because you're good. And I want to keep going through the same thing over and over, and you're still going to go through your cycle. It's not like that's going to end. Everybody has this cycle that they go through, but it won't be so extreme. You won't have to fall to a place where maybe you take 5 steps forward and 1 step back. You do that. You use this prayer to separate yourself from all the soulish things you use to build yourself up and empower yourself with. And you're going to look back on 6 months and a year, and it's like you won't even recognize yourself. You'll just absolutely soar spiritually because you're not going around the same circle over and over and over having the same result. And I think that's a good thing. I mean, we're here, we're showing up, we're doing church. Might as well face some of the hard things that we're facing and just do it once. Instead of building ourselves up with some sort of empowerment that's gonna crash when reality comes breaking in. We could just stay in reality and look at ourselves. Is that the thing that you do first and foremost? Probably not the gut reaction in the beginning. The gut reaction of most people tends to be explanation, defending themselves, avoidance, and we have to overcome all those things just to be able to say, well, Lord, you're showing me some things about myself that are really hard to see, and you don't hold any judgment against me, so we're free. We have such a period of grace that we're in right now that he's changing us from the inside out, and he doesn't hold any of it against us. So if that's the case, why defend ourselves? Why avoid it? Why go into lies and denial if it's like we're at his throne of grace already? He's already forgiven us. Why not just own it and say, okay, well, now I have to use a different energy, something that isn't going to cause me to crash, but cause me to take a step forward in the right direction. Why? Well, Lord, because I love you. That's it. That was Jesus's motives, which was his Spirit being the Holy Spirit. What's the motives of the Holy Spirit? Jesus' Spirit please the Father. Anything else that you use to try and be something different than that thing that you didn't like about yourself, you're going to crash. You're going to be a roller coaster. Until you learn your lesson that I have to not just recognize the truth about myself, but I actually have to change my viewpoint, my attitude, my agenda from one that's selfish to one that's love. In concept, it sounds really, really simple what we're talking about, but in practice, it's pretty hard to do what I'm saying. So which means in that moment when everything inside of you just wants to escape, avoid, go into denial, go into fear, maybe you pick up that prayer and you say, I'm going to read this out loud until I mean it. I'm going to take a walk. I'm going to ask for prayer. I'm going to do whatever it takes to get my heart to that place, because I don't want to go around one more time and then find out that I didn't really progress in this area. You do this, your life will steady out, and you will find so much joy and so much contentment that you'll wish you did it years ago. And it won't matter. Hard circumstances, just whatever comes your way, you will be that straight line on the graph. Not the one that's going up and down because of all the empowering energies you're trying to use to protect yourself with or to do life with. You just be a straight line. You'll be completely steady. Even in hard times, completely content. At peace. Filled with joy. Loving your life. You're not using anything else. You just be as a simple person who just recognizes their need for Jesus and is trying to love them back.